Dr. Farooq, you are a Riverside School Board member. You were born and raised in inland Southern California and grew up attending local public schools in Riverside County within Jurupa Valley. Thank you so much for joining us again on Policy Chats.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, Maddie.
Wonderful. I'd love to jump in as we will be discussing returning to school in the fall. Just recently in April, Governor Gavin Newsom urged schools to prepare for full in-person instruction this fall as coronavirus rates drop and vaccinations ramp up across the state. However, he has not indicated that he would sign an executive order to force open classrooms. Given your role at Riverside Unified School District, what are your thoughts on the governor's call to action?
Well, we're very fortunate and grateful that the governor has had a very serious commitment to supporting public education during this pandemic. His recent May revised budget proposal really reflects that, historically significant increases in public schools and K through 12 education. So very grateful for that. For us, we are prepared, regardless of whatever approach that we get direction from the state. We as a school district are prepared. We're very proud of how our students, our staff, and our families have just been navigating the different challenges related to the pandemic up until now. And we know that ideally, for most students, I don't want to say for everybody, that being back in person full time is for many students is the optimal way to learn. And so we definitely want to be supportive of that. But for some students, and whether it's the safety conditions also, we want to have options and flexibility. And so that's really the most important factor. For us as a district, we're prepared for every scenario. We want to give our families options. And we want to make sure that at the end of the day, everybody is in a safe learning environment to succeed.
Thank you. And for the next question, I was wondering, with California having more than 1,000 school districts, there's been a lot of negotiation with labor groups representing teachers and school employees. And some of these districts have struggled a lot to find common ground with their employees. Has Riverside Unified struggled with this issue? And if so, has there been a mutually agreed upon solution to it?
So, I can speak from our experience, but we are incredibly fortunate to have two associations that have worked in a very collaborative way in terms of with our school district, our governance team. We in our Riverside Unified, we approach things from a standpoint called interest-based bargaining. And so it's a longer process. It can sometimes be more intense also, but it's allowed us to be able to engender that kind of goodwill and support where we can see things from the perspective of multiple angles and people's point of views to be able to solve problems. I believe we were the first school district in the Inland Empire that was able to come to an agreement for all K through 12 to be able to go back in person 5 days a week. Again, for those families that chose to want to do that. I believe we were the first ones. And so that I think is a demonstration of our ability to collaborate, collectively with our employee associations. And, we want to continue working with them because all of them feeling appreciated and supported is vital to the success of our students. And so we are very grateful for that.
I'm so happy to hear that. And that's so impressive. I know both children and parents' families really wanted to go back in person as soon as it was safe. So happy to hear that our USD has been able to make that shift and maybe be first. There's something you mentioned earlier, which is interesting. I wanted to ask about it, and that is flexibility. Governor Newsom has also discussed flexibility in regards to returning to school in person, citing possibly extending learning opportunities, extending the school day, and possibly even the school year. What is your opinion on implementing these ideas? And do you happen to know if Riverside Unified has a stance?
Sure. And I want to note also, when I made the comment about the first, I meant for full 5 days a week, because some school
Mm.
districts did go back 5 days a week in person, but there might have been for a couple of hours or partial day. So just want to put that disclaimer out there. In terms of the extended learning and flexibility, our school district has really been at the forefront of these issues. We already, in our current summer school programs, we've actually doubled what we typically have offered students in the past. So we've ramped up our capacity significantly already. We've added extensive summer school programs for elementary, middle school students, and we really want to dedicate our focus on not just for our students, but families also to have access to resources and opportunities to make sure that our students are as successful as possible. Because we know that for many families, uh, the challenges of being able to accommodate distance or digital learning environment is not always convenient, depending on their circumstances back at home. And so we've also provided community learning hubs for many of our priority populations of foster youth, low-income families, where they've been able to even do distance learning with that support system. I believe outside of San Francisco, we were among the first school districts in California to pilot those programs. San Francisco, I believe, was the first one. And we're in the process of establishing wellness centers. Our social emotional well-being of our students is a huge priority. We've developed specific softwares and programs that we've made accessible to our families. So we're approaching this on a lot of different fronts, but the bottom line is we want them to be supported and have expanded capacity of learning options.
Perfect.
Thank you. And part of my next question you kind of already answered, but I want to kind of dive deeper into it. And it's this idea about childcare. And for younger students in particular, childcare is from social interaction and extracurriculars it's a crucial part of their development. And Riverside Unified is proceeding with a plan of also having before and after school programs be virtual, and social interaction among students is obviously going to be limited when they're on campus. So with all that said, and what you already previously said, how can we ensure that students are going to get that care and support they need when many of these opportunities are going to remain virtual or limited in nature?
Well, I mean, the key is that we have to have the mindset that within the parameters of what's possible, we are working proactively, and we're going to go out of our way to be creative in offering as many possibilities for our students as possible. And so, our school district, from a branding standpoint, and the spirit of our values, has been a district of choices. So even prior to the pandemic, we had already been offering in-person and virtual options, obviously in person, but we even have a virtual school prior to the pandemic. And so we were very well prepared because of that to transition to these processes and be able to build it up to scale. And in terms of the fall, we've already had parents provide their preferences and selections. And so right now, our surveys are showing 90% of students have chosen to come back in person, and the remaining want to do virtual, or they want to do home-based, where their parent or caregiver is the primary instructor. But that represents about 10%. 90% want to go back in person. We do want to have before and after school enrichment opportunities for in person, with also virtual options for those that don't. We want to be able to provide those flexibilities. We're developing extra co-curricular offerings as well. We did host an in-person graduation for the graduating class of 2021, so we're really proud of that. But again, these are dynamic situations, so depending on the conditions that we'll be operating in the fall, we'll adapt, but we're preparing with the mindset that we'll be able to offer a wide range of options for families.
That's so great, and happy to hear that the district is asking for feedback, almost how we go, evidence-based policy. It seems like, that's what you're doing in a different way. I am curious with this balance between in-person activities and virtual. it's wonderful. It seems like you're going off of demand and of course considering safety as well. Is there anything else that you can let us in on this thought process, conversations that are happening as you discuss hardships students are currently facing or have faced this past year? And again, just how that transition to what will be in person or remain virtual, however that can best be done.
Absolutely. Well, I think with our staff, I think there's not always a full appreciation of how difficult it has been for our employees also to have to make these adjustments, given everything that's going on in their lives as well. And so I think professional development has been a very vital tool to supporting our employees so that they can hit the ground running and be able to focus their attention on what they do best, which is, in the teacher's case, teaching our children. But we have so many other supportive services of guidance counselors, psychologists, social emotional well-being counselors that all have had to make adjustments. And I think the training and professional development that we're providing hopefully has helped facilitate those efforts. I would say for our students, students have been incredibly resilient. But what we've been seeing just from our data and anecdotally as well is that the social emotional aspect, the mental health, has been a challenge, and for some students much more so than others. And so we want to make sure that we have a variety of approaches that we're providing, not just in person but virtual as well. We're working with community-based organizations, the county, on different organizations that have specialized services related to these efforts outside of our school district also, so that our students have every single option possible to helping them through this. Getting internet access at home for many families, that in itself was a challenge. And so we made sure that not just every student that requested it received the internet, but even the people we didn't hear from, we went out of our way to checking in on them and finding out if that was something that for whatever reason they didn't know that they could ask for. We want to make sure everybody's prepared for that. And so it's a multifaceted approach. There's not a one way we can prepare our students and our employees and our families for all these adjustments, but we feel like we're giving them many options to work with.
Yeah, and something that you mentioned was that was really interesting was this idea that there's going to be a lot of there are different factors to it. There are different things we have to consider. And one thing I'd like for us to focus on now is how the approach is going to be different for elementary students versus older students, such as middle school or high school. Is Riverside Unified considering a different approach to reopening for, say, kindergartners or first graders versus seniors at a high school?
Yes, our reopening plan has always been based on age appropriateness and readiness of our students. And so, just the safety guidelines alone, there's different circumstances. And, partially it has to do with the density of students, in a classroom or a given school. High schools happen to have higher concentration of students in general. So just those dynamics, when you talk about spacing, right? In the past, if it was 6 feet of space, just naturally, if there's more students, you're going to have to take more things into consideration. So everything was done, with an age appropriateness kind of mindset. But moving forward, also, it's also a matter of how much we need to mentally prepare our students, what kinds of in terms of the social emotional support that they receive. Again, all of it should be age appropriate and tailored to the students based on the way that they can process this information. So we absolutely have adapted based on grade levels.
And going off of what you just said, with older students being more, adept to online learning and having, being able to be a little bit more independent, would you say that maintaining virtual classrooms for the time being would be a better strategy for them moving forward? Or is the focus on we have to get students back in person as soon as we can when it's safe and possible?
Well, we've always, and I mentioned this before, that our school district had virtual options prior to the pandemic. And so in general, our spirit has been about district of choice. The parents and the students together are best equipped to making that decision. Some students have thrived in this virtual environment more so than they did in person. That being said, when you look at the aggregate, when you look at the majority of students, it's very clear that in-person learning, generally speaking, again, is the most impactful. And in the social interaction, and that component is of vital importance of this equation as well, right? And not to say that there isn't socializing and interactions being done virtually, but we all know it's not the same. And so we want to make sure, and that's why whether it's extracurricular activities or other things, that there's opportunities afforded to even the virtual students to be able to have those interactions. But in general, we want to make sure that there's a real capacity and feeling of support to going back in person full time.
Yes, and I did not know that Riverside Unified School District offered virtual before the pandemic. I had never heard of that, and I do think that is a great idea. Every child is different, every home life, whatever it may be, that may be something that could work better and maybe has worked better for some students throughout this pandemic. As we conclude this interview, I would just love to kind of end on a broad question and ask your perspective on what we have learned, what you at Riverside Unified School District have learned over the past year, just in regards to education. If there's been a mindset change, any big takeaways and things you want to hold on to for the future.
Well, I think one thing that I'm very pleased about that's happened out of this is I think in the public consciousness overall, there's more of an awareness and appreciation of the value that school districts, public education plays in our communities that transcends just educating our students, which I shouldn't even say just, I mean, that's in and of itself is an extraordinary value. But I think we're seeing now the nexus between public schools and the workforce, childcare, and all of these kinds of things that are all connected to each other. The services that we provide that extends beyond children to their parents and families as well. The meals that we've been providing, which we've provided millions of meals, throughout the pandemic for many families. So my point is one, I think there's hopefully is a deeper sense of commitment and value for school districts in general. I think I'm just inspired by the resiliency that whether it's our students, our parents, our employees have demonstrated in navigating this crisis. I think the sense of flexibility, that I mentioned earlier, the ability to adapt to the environment, that's a mindset that has value beyond the pandemic. Those are important things. And most importantly, listening. There's so much we learned how to be better in tune with the needs of our students and our employees through this process, and that communication. And hopefully all of these things, those positive aspects, can continue on, and we can have a deeper cohesion and support for our students and our district and our community. So a lot to learn from, and hopefully we can emerge stronger because of all these things.
Yes. Thank you so much for all of your work advocating for students and focusing on their emotional, mental well-being as well. And just for promoting this idea that, public education offers so much, and that hopefully, I just love that lasting note that we can understand its value and maybe shift more focus and prioritization to it. I'm very interested in education reform myself. So just thank you so much for all the work that you do, and for again joining us for another episode of Policy Chats. We know you're so busy, so we just really appreciate it.
Thank you, Maddie and Kevin, and looking forward to being in touch with all of you. Take care.